Dublin is one of the wealthiest cities in Europe. It is the European headquarters to some of the world's biggest companies. Billions flow through it every year, yet many people are still left wondering, why does it look so rough? Walk through parts of the city centre and even on its outskirts, you'll come across streets like this, derelict buildings, empty lots and graffiti-covered architecture. How can a capital city with one of Europe's strongest economies still struggle with urban decay? Today we're going to look at the surprising history behind Dublin's dereliction problem. In the late 18th century, Dublin was one of the biggest cities in the British Empire. It became famous for its Georgian architecture. Many of the elegant streets we see today were built during this period, but Dublin's fortunes changed dramatically after the Act of Union in 1801. Political power moved to London, many wealthy families left, and the large Georgian houses gradually fell into decline. By the 19th century, many Georgian mansions had been divided into overcrowded tenements. Dublin developed some of the worst urban poverty in Europe. Entire families lived in single rooms, and building maintenance collapsed. The city entered the 20th century carrying the legacy of decades of neglect. After independence in 1922, the new Irish Free State faced enormous challenges, and housing was just one of them. And resources were limited, so the focus became building houses and not preserving the historic structures. Many old buildings were left to rot or were demolished, and some, luckily enough, were preserved. Finally, after years of economic stagnation and financial mismanagement, the Celtic Tiger years would hit Ireland and international investment would pour in. However, those years would also add to the dereliction that you see. Developers would focus on office blocks, apartments and large-scale housing projects that would be financially beneficial, and they neglected the historic buildings. Then, when the financial crash hit in 2008, the old and new building developments that were neglected and abandoned would add to the eyesore that's in the city. When Ireland's property bubble burst in 2008, investment and redevelopment stopped almost overnight. Large sites remained empty and vacant, and redevelopment plans were stalled. This led to increased number of sites across the city being unused and later falling into dereliction and abandonment over the 2010s. And this may be the most frustrating aspect of Dublin's housing crisis. Thousands need homes, especially the homeless, yet many buildings remain vacant. And the question is why? And the answer to this isn't easy. There's a number of complicated ownership rights. Some buildings are caught up in inheritance disputes, and other owners will hold on to the property, hoping that the price will go up and they can either sell or redevelop at a later stage. Also, the ownership of some buildings, especially the more historic ones, is very hard to trace, and the government is struggling with that. O'Connell Street should be one of Europe's greatest boulevards, yet it still has faced years of criticism. Many of the top floors of the buildings have remained empty, and some of the historic buildings have been left to crumble. While regeneration efforts have been put in place, including a very stupid plan to turn the GPO into a shopping centre, it still does face a lot of criticism, especially being the leading street in the capital city. While I do agree that O'Connell Street isn't the worst street in Dublin, many of the surrounding areas such as Moore Street and Moore Lane do have a lot to answer for. So, is Dublin worse than other European cities? Well, that all depends on where you compare it to. Cities like Vienna, Amsterdam and Berlin invested in urban renewal decades ago, and the Irish government isn't known for its long-term strategies. At the moment, we're struggling with a housing crisis, a dereliction crisis, a children's hospital that can't be built. Dublin experienced different economic and political circumstances to many of these other cities, and the city is not uniquely troubled. But many visitors are still surprised by how visible dereliction remains in a wealthy capital, supposedly one of the wealthiest in Europe. Dublin's appearance isn't the result of one failure, but 2 centuries of political and economic change. Obviously, other decisions could have been made to rectify some of the situations that the government and the people of Dublin now find themselves in. But we just have to hope that changes and developments can reduce the dereliction, increase the use of the properties, and then help those who need housing, accommodation and commercial businesses in many of the derelict and unused sites across the city.